Okay, so in civics today, we've got two more slides, two more cases actually to get through. Um, one of them has this Heart of Atlanta Motel has a lot more to do with ending segregation. The other is a lot more to do with all Americans' rights based on the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. So I'm just going to start with this Heart of Atlanta Motel versus the United States in 1994. The background of this really, you just need to know that the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. The Civil Rights Act is something that you're probably familiar with, even if you don't know it. If you've ever seen in I know you guys don't apply for jobs or things like that yet, but sometimes you might see it in a job description, or you might see it on college applications. But pretty much you'll see some language that pretty much says that this institution does not discriminate on the basis of race, sex, religion, orientation, or things like that. And that language comes into play in the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act, the goal of it was to not let institutions keep people out based on their race or their sex, but mostly race. There have been kind of several things that have been added to this and powers that have been defined to this act since then. But the primary goal is we're not going to segregate based on race in the United States. So this is the first case where that gets challenged. And it gets challenged, by the Heart of Atlanta Motel in Georgia. Because up until now, until 64, even though Brown versus Board had been passed, that really really switched things up when it came to segregation. The South had maintained segregation even after that, well into the 60s, and would continue to try to do it past this case into the 60s. It took a long time for segregation to end, and this is one of the cases that helps it end. So this hotel doesn't like the Civil Rights Act. It doesn't want to let black people stay in the motel. So the owner of the motel sues the United States and pretty much says this law that Congress made is unconstitutional because it's telling me what to do with my property, and I own the property, and I'm supposed to be able to run my property and run my business how I see fit. So he says it's unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court essentially totally disagrees with him. And they have a couple of reasons why they do. One of the ways that they say that Congress was right in making the law is that this motel was based at a couple of interstate highways, and most of the people that stayed in the motel were from out of state. So it looked back at the Constitution and said Congress has the ability to regulate interstate commerce. So it's totally justified in making this law. But the important thing is, regardless of how they got there, the Supreme Court upheld the law. They said that, and it's this line here at the bottom, the Supreme Court claimed businesses cannot refuse customers based on their race. Now, there are some other issues that come up with this that make it more confusing. For instance, in recent years, every year you'll see in the news some business owner refused to say bake a cake for a gay couple that's getting married, and that's slightly different because they're arguing that this is the refusal to do that is based on their own religious practices. So that calls into some different questions, and it's not really what this case is about. This case is saying that just as a rule, you as a business owner cannot refuse to serve someone just because they are black or just because they are a woman or just because they are gay or anything like that. You have to allow people to come to your business. Now, events after that might change the situation, but you have to let people in the door, essentially, regardless of what they look like, is what this Supreme Court case upholds. Here you can see some pictures of the motel at the time, and then you can see the timeline of these cases. So Plessy versus Ferguson is in the 1890s, Brown versus Ford in the 1950s, Heart of Atlanta in 64, and Charlotte Meck in 69. So it's not really, when you think about it, that long of a period of time. There are plenty of people who lived and died and lived through every single one of these court cases. And if you stop here, you probably know people that are alive right now that were alive before Brown versus Board of Education and before these other two court cases came to fruition. So it's not that far in our past that this stuff had to be hashed out. The next case, and the last one we're going to talk about before I turn it over to you guys and let you guys teach these Supreme Court cases, is Texas versus Johnson. Texas versus Johnson results out of a protest. So in '84, there were some people protesting the Republican National Convention. These people were, kind of, in some ways, kind of an extremist group. They're really far left activists. The People's, Revolutionary Communist Party, and their protests did get out of hand. They destroyed property. They did do things that were illegal. But what Gregory Johnson, one of the members of the protest, did that got him in so much more trouble was burn an American flag. Um, which at the time in the state of Texas was against the law because, as it says here, he's arrested because it was illegal to desecrate a venerated object, was what the law said. So the flag was a venerated object. Um, Essentially, the result of this is, he appeals his ruling, which was harsh. He got 5 years in prison and, was fined a pretty substantial amount of money. But he appeals to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, with a very narrow decision, 5-4, says that flag burning is protected by the Constitution. It says the First Amendment to freedom of speech protects expression. So, and it had decided this before in other cases, the other cases that we will look at when you guys actually do this on your own. That burning the flag was a form of political speech. It was political expression, and that it's protected. So it essentially says this Texas state law is unconstitutional. Now, like I said, it's a very close ruling. It's 5-4. 4 of the Supreme Court justices disagreed, and this is very often a case that a lot of people debate and disagree about a lot. And we'll probably do that at some point when we get back to school. Here you can see an actual picture of Gregory Joey Three Guns Johnson being arrested at the time. But anyway, that's what we'll stop for today. If you've got questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow.